Hey there, welcome to the DFS build. This is the early look at the Week 6 NFL DFS main slate over at DraftKings. I am Kevin. Just going to walk you through my first reactions to some of these prices, highlight the plays that I'm looking at early, and just go from there. Later in the week, Taylor and I will break down the main slate and go game by game, highlighting our top plays and looking at ownership and projections and matchups and all that fun stuff. This is just kind of like, hey, let's get started. It is, Wednesday. We have a Thursday night football game coming tomorrow. I already have a video out for that. If you like breakdowns of every slate and you like a little bit of nuance to the process, follow us, hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, help us out a little bit, and also come join us in Discord. 100% free to come talk shop in Discord. And then, of course, we do have premium picks at our site, dfsbuild.com. But the point here is honestly just to let's go look at the salaries. Let's go look at some of the matchups and just see who stands out right away. Not making any finalized picks today. Just looking at the slate and trying to see what is going to be the best approach and what is the field maybe going to be doing. Ownership is not going to be updated now. Every week we look at ownership early Monday or Tuesday, and it's just it's not worth it because things are going to change greatly. Like last week we had a ton of running back value completely change. Where the ownership was going to be. But chalk does seem to hit a lot. So certainly something we want to pay attention to. But here, let's go check it out at quarterback. We do not have a Josh Allen. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is still out. This is just another interesting slate where I think we're going to be paying down at quarterback. And, the first thing is there's nobody really that expensive in the first place. We don't have a single quarterback here over 7K, which is really nice because DraftKings definitely adjusted the pricing. We are looking at 2 stud running backs over 8K, and we're looking at Puka Nacua being just an insane 8.7K. So the funny thing is, him, C-Mac, and JT, they're all in that 8.5, 8 to 7 range, which rightfully so. These guys are monsters at this point, so you shouldn't be able to comfortably get to all three of them, or honestly, even 2 of them might be a little bit difficult to actually, roster them and formulate a competitive team. You might just need to pick one and go from there. But they all look really good, and the prices make sense. They've been smashing. Puka and C-Mac specifically have had 22 plus fantasy points in every single game. Eventually, that's going to run out, and one of these dudes is going to hit a wall. Of that trio, JT has been the one to get tripped up a couple times. So just keep that in mind. Very possible all 3 hit and smash and are worth their price tag. And trying to worry about ownership and which one to fade might not matter. But also possible one of them just finally, does not get there. And that could be the difference in this slate. Anyways, at quarterback though, we do have some really nice projections, which is obviously good since these guys are pretty darn cheap across the board. Justin Herbert is shaping up to be the chalk. That makes sense because the Dolphins are a very good matchup. Herbert, though, has not been great lately just because they do not have Joe Alt, their main left tackle. Since that KC game where he had 30 fantasy points, he hasn't even top 20. So in theory, Herbert looks good in terms of he's great. He has weapons. And Miami, Miami is a really good matchup. I'm going to check Joe Alt's injury status. Let's see. I don't think – he could be back sooner than later. That was 4 days ago. So we'll see. Keep an eye on Joel. I just think anytime a key offensive lineman is out or injured, we need to pay attention to that. So Miami is not a scary matchup, but, the Commanders were a pass funnel defense too. And what did Justin Herbert do in that situation? 15 fantasy points. That is not what we're paying for, even at 6.3K. The risk is kind of baked in there, but if he's going to be chalky, right away, I'm doing anything and everything else. I think Herbert's a good play in a vacuum, but especially if Alt is not in, I don't want to mess with the Chargers really right now. They even lost to Marion Hampton, their running back. So more on that in a little bit. But the point being here, Chargers feel a little bit scary as chalk. I'm going to go do something else. The nice thing about that is there are a ton of good options. Dak Prescott at 6.5K against the Panthers. Not as juicy of a matchup, but Dak Prescott has been in flames. 28 plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games, 26 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. Carolina did give up some production to Tua in the passing game against, Miami. They've been kind of up and down defensively. They went and completely iced the Falcons in a shutout win. I think it's 30-0. But they've definitely been up and down. They've definitely given up some production, and Dallas looks to be in a groove even without CD. So Dak is a really good pivot off of Herbert. He's coming in with the second most ownership, though. So I am not going to always say, like, oh, you have to fade a guy because he's chalky. But these guys are two of the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. So naturally, if they're going to be chalky and they're going to be a little bit of expensive compared to some of the other options at quarterback, right away, I'm just like, what else can I do on this slate where I'm getting good value, the projection's solid, the matchup is good, but I'm saving some cash and maybe also at the same time getting different. So that's just my initial reaction. To me, right away, yes, there are obvious good options at quarterback up top, and we should get some exposure to them. But quarterback is where I can save some money and hopefully open up some funds to go get, one or even two of that stud trio that I mentioned before. So right away, Herbert and Prescott, totally fine, but I'm going to try to go do something else. If you want to save a tiny bit of money and get a little bit of leverage there in terms of the ownership, Jordan Love looks really good. Bengals are terrible defensively. They're giving up production to every single offense they face. The Lions just dropped 37 points on them, which is a little surprising that they didn't put up more, to be honest. But Jordan Love had 30 fantasy points against Dallas. Packers are coming out of a bye. He really hasn't done that much beyond that. I'm curious to see if that ownership comes in a little bit inflated, just because the matchup is so good and the chalk is obviously, not Love currently. He's owned enough that I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up pushing for like 10% ownership or something, especially in like single entry. But that said, Love looked great last time out. He had a full week off. His team's getting a little bit healthier, and the Bengals are as good of a matchup as you can ask for, and the game is at home. And he also comes in with the third best projection. So if he's going to be right there, cheaper than Herbert and Prescott, lower owned than Herbert and Prescott, Love looks like the top pivot right now at quarterback. And 6.2K, you're still paying over 6K, but you're not paying 6.3 and you're not paying 6.5. So tiny bit of savings and a little bit of leverage there on what the field might be doing. Baker at 6-6 against the 49ers. Not super excited to do that. Still doesn't have Mike Evans. 49ers are still a decent defensive team in theory. And Baker Mayfield just can be an up and down guy. Like, that has not been the case, really. He's been pretty rock solid. 22 plus fantasy points in 21 plus fantasy points in 3 games this year. And his floor has been 17, like pretty darn good. Really big game last week too. So I think if you want to go get Baker, you can. Good projection. I don't love the matchup. And he's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. So by default, I'm just naturally not looking to go get him. The perk would be that he's not going to be very owned. So there's always that. If you want to go pair him with Igbuka, you certainly could. Kyler Murray at 5.7. In theory, that's a good value, especially if he's not going to be owned. Looks like my screen is struggling to load here. Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. All right, so but the ceiling just hasn't really been there. He did finally get a rushing touchdown last week, but he's maxed out at like 18 fantasy points, which is really disconcerting. And Indianapolis is especially on the road, not a good spot. And boy, the Cardinals just must be in just a bad way right now after the whole implosion last week. So either they're going to bounce back and he's going to be way too cheap at 5.7, or that whole team is just going to self-destruct completely. But the guy that really stands out here to me in this range, if you're going to pay around 6K, is going to be Daniel Jones once again. 22 fantasy points last week. The 2 weeks ago when he only had 12, he should have had another touchdown. So he should have had at least, 16, 17 fantasy points there. So it still should have been a decent game. But we've seen his ceiling for sure a few times this year, and we know he can smash. I think he's an interesting leverage play against the JT ownership. Like right now, he's certainly not unknown. Fourth most owned quarterback on the slate, but only 6K for DJ, and we know he has a ceiling. If you don't want to play Jonathan Taylor, then stacking Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren, or Daniel Jones and like Michael Pittman or something, that's certainly an interesting thing to do, especially as we get into the week. If his ownership keeps dropping down, because you come down here, Trevor Lawrence is pretty chalky right now, coming off of a huge 28-point fantasy outing. And this week he gets the Seahawks, who have actually given up quite a bit of production through the air lately. I mean, specifically last week, 26 fantasy points to Baker Mayfield. So 5.1K, Trevor Lawrence is going to look pretty appealing. Personally, that's not something I'm interested in, because the price is great. The last game was great. from fantasy perspective. The matchup does look okay, but Seattle has been a strong defensive team. And are we really going to trust in Trevor Lawrence suddenly being a consistent and reliable DFS option? I mean, this game log is scary. 11, 21, 8, 13, 28. I just don't think he's the type of guy where we can be like, oh, finally, he had a smash week. Let's go definitely bet and go all in on him going smash again second week in a row. I don't really think so. So if Trevor Lawrence is going to be a mega chalk at 5.1, I'm going to try to do something else. Again, you don't always fade the chalk. You don't have to fade every bit of chalk you ever see. But at quarterback, where there is no clear-cut stud, there are a ton of value options here. I'm not going to do what everybody's going to do this week, especially when I do want like the chalky studs. That's where I don't want to get different. I do want Puka or C-Mac or both in my lineup, or JT obviously too. So quarterback is where I want to get different. I don't want to eat the Herbert and T-Law chalk this week. One interesting pivot is going to be Bryce Young. He did not work out as a sleeper on a high level last week, but 14 fantasy points, not that bad. He was 4.7K. The price has only gone up $100. He remains a really good play, and he gets the Dallas Cowboys defense too. I mean, they shut down the Jets for 3 quarters, but they still ultimately gave up 25 fantasy points to Justin Fields. And like every single game this year, they've given up production to the quarterback position. I'm a little concerned that them getting healthier defensively and like looking pretty darn good for 3 quarters. I know it's the Jets, but I'm a little concerned in that, you know, maybe Dallas, their defense could be turning around a little bit, but still, we're not paying very much. We're getting instant leverage against chalky plays at quarterback. And there is upside here, especially if the Dallas defense remains bad. Like Bryce Young could have a great game. I know, trusting in Bryce Young, not fun, but 4.8K, you could do a lot worse. And he is a direct pivot away from Trevor Lawrence, who I don't know why we're feeling any better about chalky Trevor Lawrence. I don't. So I wouldn't. Geno Smith is interesting at 5.2. Spencer Rattler, like everybody's down on Rattler, but Rattler looked pretty good last week, actually. 16 fantasy points. Somebody in our Discord was like, hey, what about Spencer Rattler? And I was like, no, just immediate no. But, 16 fantasy points for his price, that wasn't bad. Like he didn't sink you for sure. And he's had 15 plus fantasy points 3 times on the year. Do I have a lot of faith in Spencer Rattler? Absolutely not. But the Patriots have given up production through the air throughout the season. His projection's pretty good for his price tag too. So I don't hate it. I think I'd rather go Bryce Young. I probably would even rather eat the Trevor Lawrence chalk, but Rattler is in play due to his price. The reality here is there are just a lot of guys who are okay options or in smash spots or just really cheap that we should be considering here compared to the chalky options. Even when I mentioned Joe Flacco, if he ends up getting the start, I know it's like super short notice. He just got acquired by the Bengals, but they do not have any confidence in Jake Browning. They got to head up to Green Bay. Flacco did not play well against Green Bay the first time he had him, but that time he also did not have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki, Chase Brown. Like the Bengals are loaded offensively. They just need somebody to distribute the ball. So Flacco is capable of doing that, getting the ball out and actually being on target, like more so than Browning has been. So, I mean, he's 4K flat. Like, I don't mind it. Like, if he starts, I don't think it's the worst thing to do in GPPs, especially if you're going to have interest in Chase or any of the other Bengals in the passing game. Flacco is a stackable option. It's kind of like the opposite of what I was looking at with the Dallas thing. Like, is Green Bay's defense just bad all of a sudden? Like, they were great in the first 3 games. Like, they completely shut down Cleveland's offense, and interceptions the only reason why Cleveland scored a touchdown in the game they lost. They completely shut down the Lions, completely shut down the Commanders, and then out of nowhere in Dallas, they gave up 40 points. So is that more on the road, primetime setting, desperate Cowboys just going off? Or are there holes to poke here and like a talented Bengals offense could cause some trouble? It's worth considering. But either way, Flacco's 4K flat, so the risk is baked into the price. Just obviously check and see if he actually ends up starting. So not super interested in these other guys. Cam Ward at 4.6 against the Raiders, a beatable defense. Cam Ward did end up looking pretty darn good in the second half against Arizona. The floor is just horrifyingly low. 9 fantasy points, despite that strong second half last week. And so far, his ceiling has been 12 fantasy points. So it's bad out there. Point is, though, there's a lot of value, and there is not, to me, one clear-cut must-play option at quarterback. I think the field is pointed to Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, but due to price and due to a lot of guys being like in similar spots or even better, facing better matchups, I think it's wide open, and I'm going to be looking to get different there. All right, so at running back, C-Mac has just been a DFS god, dude. Just like, and going into redraft, I was like, McCaffrey is the best value on the board. I like him better than Saquon at that position at the end of round one, sometimes in early round two. I was like, go get C-Mac. And he got nicked up before the second game, and everybody's like, oh, it's over. C-Mac is injured again. He's been a machine, and he looks super healthy, super explosive, 22 plus fantasy points in every game. I am all in on C-Mac. I don't think, let me check actually what the actual matchup is here for the Bucks on paper here. So the Buccaneers, I feel like I remember them being decent against. Yeah, they're kind of middle of the pack against running backs. But, I mean, C-Mac has faced tougher matchups on the year, so I'm not going to be afraid of that whatsoever. Jonathan Taylor going up against Arizona Cardinals, it's not like it's not much different. The Arizona Cardinals are probably a worse matchup, so a better matchup for JT than C-Mac is looking at Tampa Bay. But I think it's just kind of the same thing. Like, they're both unstoppable forces. But C-Mac comes in with a better projection, $100 cheaper than JT, and only just a little bit more owned. If that is what we're looking at, I'm just going to pick McCaffrey. I just feel like he's more stable. JT has an immense ceiling, but he's been pretty touchdown dependent in his blow-up games. I know that's a silly thing. Like, oh, well, if he didn't score 3 touchdowns, he wouldn't be good. Well, I know that sounds stupid, but he did have 2-3 touchdown games, and that's why he has now put up 30-plus fantasy points 3 times. So he's not going to score 3 touchdowns every game, obviously. So I just feel like there are going to be ebbs and flows with JT, a lot more so than McCaffrey, and that is the main point here. You could be just fine with JT at 8.5 because he obviously has a 30-plus upside for sure. Like, McCaffrey, as good as he's been, has not done that yet. So that is a good selling point for JT. Obviously, they look to him in the red zone, when he's hot. But the floor is lower. It just is. So certainly, if I had to pick right now which running back I'm going to pay for, it's going to be McCaffrey. Devon Achane, once again, is certainly in play. His price has come up, though, $7.8K, $500 more than he was last week. Was not very efficient last week. Even though he scored a touchdown and caught 6 passes, he still only got 16 fantasy points. Like, the upside is massive. We saw that back in week 2, 26 fantasy points. But, I don't know, man. I feel like now that Tyreek Hill is not there, it's possible that while the role is like really, really safe, it's possible defenses can just key in on him more than ever. That said, still a great value. If you wanted to just look at value plus ceiling here, like, Achane is probably looking like the best play, up top as far as like guys over 7K. Almost a very similar projection to McCaffrey and JT. He's way cheaper than them, almost $1,000 cheaper, and he's coming in as like the second chalkiest running back because of those reasons. So I don't have a problem with Achane. I think going in, I just feel like I would rather go pay, $600 more for the stability of McCaffrey. That's just where I'm at there. Ashton Genty, though, looks like the best top end value of the position, like by far, because this is like basically Christian McCaffrey light. I know the floor has been really, really low for him, but like, we're kind of looking at a situation like Achane, right? So like, we do have an explosive guy. We do have a guy who gets volume. We do have a guy that catches passes, and he is going to get looks, when they get in the red zone too. We saw that 2 weeks ago, 37 fantasy points against the Bears. That was amazing. And then we had 15 fantasy points last week, and then the other games of his career so far have been bad. And that all comes down to the Raiders not having a strong offensive line and maybe just not the best offense in general. And now Brock Bowers isn't playing. So it works both ways. Like, on one hand, his supporting cast and like the system and everything really hinders him, but the volume is going to be there. So I think Genty at 6.9K, especially against the Titans, by the way, who are a bottom 5 defense against running backs and just bad across the board, it's just a smash spot. So if I was building right now, I'm personally loving the idea of going McCaffrey, Genty, and then we'll see what happens with the rest. No issues with JT or Achane. It's not like they're bad plays, but if Genty's going to be way less owned than Achane and $900 cheaper, like that really stands out to me as something I can exploit on this slate. No problem with Javonte Williams at 6.4K. This dude just keeps nuking. Like, he's just crushing every week. So don't have an issue with that. Role-wise, Javonte looks great. I feel like the Panthers are, middle of the pack kind of? Yeah, kind of middle of the pack against the run. They could certainly be had. Like, Achane did not, explode against them as a runner. I will say that. But just role-wise, Javonte looks good. No problem there. I do prefer Kyren Williams, though. I know Kyren Williams has lost some touches to Blake Corum and stuff, but he got it going on Thursday Night Football last week against the 49ers, which is not an easy matchup. And he even fumbled. They lost the game because of him, basically. And he still had 32 fantasy points. So as long as his role is going to be there, I have no issue with Kyren Williams. And he's facing now the Ravens defense and team as a whole, they might be desperate, and maybe that turns the tide here a little bit, but it sure didn't do that last week when they got completely housed by the Texans of all teams. The Rams are way better than the Texans, and they're coming in, and Baltimore is the second worst defense against fantasy running backs. Kyren at 6.3 is a smash for me. He's not owned enough. So, if I wanted to, I think you could make a case to go Kyren, Genty, and just fade those top running backs and make Puka a priority. That's certainly a viable strategy. So he looks really good. Judkins is explosive with a huge role. I like him. I'm out on Derrick Henry. The Rams are very good against running backs, and Derrick Henry has been bad. Not good. Nobody else here really stands out as a major priority. Rachaad White's price has come up to 6K. I think he's all right. If Bucky Irving remains out, but I don't think he's a must. He was 4.7K last week. That was pretty must territory, especially when anytime a guy is 4.7K and it makes sense to play him and he's chalk, it's really tough to get away from that. 6K Rachaad White, though, if he was chalk and he's coming at 13% ownership, I don't think I have to do that. I'd rather go $300 more and get Kyren, $900 more and get Genty. That's where I'm at there. I think he's an okay play, just not a priority for me. Michael Carter, same thing, 5.3K. The Cardinals are not a very reliable team. On the road against the Colts, not a great spot. And then, of course, he still has Bam Knight as a guy who could steal. I don't think they're going to give Emari Demercado too many more touches after blowing that game, basically. So Michael Carter might be safe. I just don't really trust Michael Carter personally. I think he's okay at 5.3 if we can trust that role, but not something I'm super excited to do. Keep an eye on the Chuba Hubbard and Jaylen Warren injuries. Not psyched to play Steelers running backs against a very good Browns front seven. So probably just going to ignore that personally. And then you do have the whole Rico Dowdle 200 plus yards thing. He was 4.3K last week, and that was borderline must play as well. But this week, even if Chuba is out, he's 5.8K now. He is facing the Cowboys. It is a good matchup. I think either of those guys will be viable, but the concern is obviously he's not going to get 30 plus fantasy points again. Most likely. I just feel like we're kind of leaving behind a lot of ceiling and hoping he kind of duplicates that. That seems unlikely. The other thing is if Chuba's back, are they just going to split the load, or is Dowdle going to completely disappear? Is Chuba going to be limited? We don't know what's going to happen with those guys. So if Chuba is in, it's a full fade. Even if Chuba is out, I feel like if he gains steam, then Dowdle is somebody I would probably go away from. The other situation to monitor is going to be Chargers. Hassan Haskins at 5K and Kamani Vidal at 5K as well. DK is pricing them horribly for us because nobody knows what to do here. Haskins and Vidal both had a little bit of a role after Hampton left with an injury last week. My guess is that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a likely timeshare. The matchup with Miami is great. Dowdle just went nuts against them. So if you want to play one of them, you can. You can. I just don't see a clear option that really stands out. Not really messing with anybody else down there right now. We'll see if that changes when we go over the main slate and go game by game. At wide receiver, it's very, very tough to not play Puka. The Ravens are horrendous. If you don't want to play Kyren, you should probably play Puka or Devontae Adams. Devontae at 6'7", that's a really good value. The Ravens are second worst against wide receivers as well. So Puka looks like an absolute smash. Devontae's interesting for leverage. You could also pair them and play Stafford if you want. I didn't even mention Stafford, but he's in a great spot. Right now, I'm kind of prioritizing Kyren personally, but I'm going to get one or two of these top studs if I can. And I think right now, based off of his consistency and the full point PPR, Puka is my favorite stud to go get. The targets, 10 plus targets in every single game. He's been doing a lot of this damage without even scoring touchdowns for the most part. So it's just the ceiling is massive and the matchup is as good as it gets. So he looks amazing. George Pickens at 6.8 comes in with the second best projection. That looks like a really good value. Emeka Egbuka just keeps crushing 34 fantasy points last week. I said something about like him not having the best separation score or something. Dumb. He just keeps producing. He just crushes every game. 23 plus fantasy points in 3 games already. This is a rookie just dominating. 49ers not the best matchup in the world, but whatever, dude. 7.2K, probably still too cheap. He's just crushing. JSN looks good. Jamar Chase, if Flacco's in there, maybe Jamar Chase goes off again. Pickens had no trouble against this Packers defense the other 2 weeks ago. So if the quarterback play is competent and the Browns or the Bengals now can protect Flacco or whoever is in there, and if nobody wants to play Jamar Chase, he's going to be very appealing at 7.7. The only problem is, like, I feel like Puka is $1,000 more and just like way safer, and also still has like a similar ceiling. So it's just like, why? Like Puka was not on the last main slate, so I was like, yeah, I'm all for Jamar Chase at like 5% ownership, and that worked out beautifully. 32 fantasy points. I just think it's less likely for it to work out this time. And I just feel like Puka is the better play. Zay Flowers, 5'9", looks like a screaming value. Jalen Waddle, big roll, 6.1K. He looks really good as well. Not seeing a ton here that I'm like, oh, I have to go play those guys. I think there's some interesting values, though, for sure. Chris Olave, still a target hog. Patriots can be a good match at 5.1K. Looks pretty good for him. Pierce Alfie's back. Don't mind it. Brian Thomas Jr., though, I am like, eventually Brian Thomas Jr. is going to score a touchdown. Pass catching. He scored a rushing touchdown back in week 2. But eventually he's going to score a touchdown, one would think. Or it was week 1. Sorry, we scored his rushing touchdown. Point is, though, he's been getting a little bit better. 10 and 12 fantasy points the last 2 games. He's getting red zone targets. He's getting enough targets to do damage with. And eventually it's going to hit. I would not be super shocked if it arrives this week. So 6.2K for Brian Thomas Jr. is very interesting, and I will be over on that. If you're going to play Trevor Lawrence, you should play BTJ, I would imagine. And even if you're not going to play Trevor Lawrence, like Seattle does give up production through the air because they're stingy on the run. So I think he looks pretty good here. Ladd and Jacoby forever are in play. Good matchups for both of them. Don't have an issue with it. They just don't like stand out as an absolute must, especially if they're going to be, well, they're not even chalky actually right now, but we'll see where the ownership lies with them. Matthew Golden, great matchup. Romeo Dobbs, like, Golden, my gosh, Golden eventually is going to absolutely nuke. So I definitely want to be in on that. He's been getting it. Been getting the ball. 7 targets in each of his last 2 games, 10 plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. They want him to blow up. It's going to happen eventually. You got to think at home against the Bengals is a pretty good spot to hope for it to happen. 5K, I like it a lot. Malik Washington did nothing with his 5 touch opportunities last week. 4 fantasy points. The floor is really low, but there is no Tyreek. And, they want to get him the ball. So I don't think he's a bad value play here at 3.7K. Just very, very low floor. He is a little bit risky for sure. Rashid Shaheed, we could definitely bet on the deep ball again. 24 fantasy points last week. Just know that he's not going to get a ton of targets. And if he doesn't hit that deep ball, it's not going to work out. I think he's a really good GPP play, though. There was one other guy. Yeah, here we go. Alec Manor. Really low floor lately, and obviously you're betting on Cam Ward having a good game. But the role is there, and he's super, super cheap. So I think he is interesting. Not a safe play, but 3.9K against the Raiders defense that can be had through the air. I think he is pretty interesting. All right, that's going to do it for wide receiver for now. Taylor and I will dig deeper into it in the next video for sure. We're going to wrap this up with tight ends. Not going to look at defenses because that is a freaking waste of time. Tight end is bleak. I think if you're going to pay up top, if you're going to pay over 5K, it's Jake Ferguson. It's not even close. Excuse me, 5.3K for a guy who's just been a monster all year. 16 plus fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. I don't see any reason to anticipate that stopping now. The Panthers are the 2nd worst defense against tight ends. So the first click for me at tight end, if I can afford it, is Jake Ferguson. And the crazy thing is Trey McBride is super, super owned here when he's done nothing to deserve that love from DFS folk. I just like the Cardinals are a mess. 9 fantasy points last week. Like The fact that he gets targets and catches has kept him like afloat, but he's not been worth the price tag. So his projection's really good, and he's projecting to be super owned. But I think Jake Ferguson's a better play. Tyler Warren continues to smash his chalk. That's chalk I'd rather eat. He's what, $600 less than McBride, and he's been way more stable. And he's actually scoring some touchdowns. He even had a rushing touchdown 2 weeks ago. So he looks really, really good. Arizona is, a top 10 matchup here for tight ends. So that looks pretty good. I still think Ferguson at only $400 more and less ownership is the more appealing play. But chalk Warren, don't have an issue with it. Haven't had an issue with it for weeks. He's just a great play. Tucker Kraft at 4.7 is a pretty good pivot away from Warren. Really good matchup against the Bengals. They've been dead last against fantasy tight ends on the year. And they are still without, their main guy, or not their main guy, but one of their top guys, Jaden Reed. They might get Christian Watson back. I don't know for sure, but even if he is, he'll be limited. So I'd imagine Tucker Kraft, he had the week off to heal his knee as well. So him being a little bit healthier and having, not as much competition for targets, he looks like a very, very interesting play at 4.7K. In terms of value, probably my favorite tight end to play on this slate. Okay, the only other guy I want to mention at tight end is going to be David Njoku, just because he's 3.5K coming off an 18-point fantasy outing. Like if Dylan Gabriel is going to figure out how to get him the ball, he looks like a really good value at 3.5. And the matchup against who are they facing this week? Steelers. Not really a matchup to be feared. Bottom 10 against tight ends. So I think that looks pretty good. Njoku is not super reliable, and there's also Harold Fannin, the rookie, that he has to contest with a little bit, but the matchup looks good. He got going last week. I'm going to definitely get some exposure to him because I want to save some cash, and tight end beyond like Ferguson and Warren is pretty volatile. All right, that's going to do it for me. Remember, this is just an early look at breaking down the options that stand out in terms of salary and matchup. We are going to do a full main slate breakdown where we go game by game and highlight our favorite plays, how we want to stack up the slate, and stuff like that. So hopefully this helps you out a little bit. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out that next video. And if you want, you come join us at Discord, 100% free. You come talk shop, ask questions, all that fun stuff. And hopefully we can have some big wins in week 6 NFL DFS. All right, thanks for watching and good luck.